For our starter today, what we're going to do is I'm going to get you to do 5 questions as quickly as you can. So I want you to start timing yourself. So either use the clock on your phone, use the stopwatch, or see if somebody roundabout has got something they could time you on, and see how long it takes you to do these 5 questions. Now we can see the type of questions we've got. We've got a half of, we've got times 5, add 16.3, take away 8.5 and divided by 4. So we've got different kinds of questions, and I haven't written in the other bits yet because I don't want you to start until we're ready to start. So what we're going to do is, in a second, the questions will appear, so start timing from then. Okay, good luck. Ready, steady, go. So you do these. Pause it just now though, because I'm going to put the answers there in a second. So pause if you haven't already. Okay, so here are your answers. So check how many you got right out of 5. Make a note of how long it took you, because when we do another set of these, we'll see if you're getting quicker or not. Okay, so remember the first one though. If you do a division, you get 36.5, but remember it's £36.50 when you write it as money, not £36.05. Okay, right, good stuff, well done. So what we're going on to today is looking at squares and rectangles. So we're just going to have a general look at squares and rectangles. Okay, yesterday we looked quite in detail at triangles to do with the different names of triangles depending on the length of the sides and the sizes of their angles. So today we're going to look at squares and rectangles, but we don't have the same kind of classification as we do for triangles. So like I say, we're just going to have a bit of a general look at squares and rectangles. So what we're going to think about is the sides on squares and rectangles and the angles, lines of symmetry. We'll look at patterns that we can make, and then we'll think about where we see squares and rectangles. Okay, so let's draw a square first of all. I'll do this so it'll be a bit clattery because I'm using my ruler. So on my screen, this is a 4 centimetre by 4 centimetre square. Okay, it probably isn't the same size on yours, because you won't be necessarily using the same thing as me. Okay, so there we go. There's a square which is 4 centimetres by 4 centimetres. So because I drew each length as 4 centimetres, we can put these marks on the sides. Remember that from looking at triangles yesterday? That if you see the same mark on different sides, what that means is they're the same length. Okay, now let's think about the angles in a square. So if I just highlight these in yellow here, what kind of angles are these? Talked about that a little bit in the last day or two. But these are right angles, aren't they? So remember, you draw right angles as a little box in the corner. So a square has 4 right angles and 4 equal sides. Now let's think about lines of symmetry. Where can we fold a square so that the 2 halves match exactly? Well, let's have a little think about that, shall we? So if we fold a square right down the middle, the 2 halves would match exactly. Okay, so there is a line of symmetry down there. Each half is a mirror image of the other half. Also, we've got one across the way, haven't we? But let's think about if we were to draw a line corner to corner. That's called the diagonal of the square. Would that be a line of symmetry? If we folded our square along that line, would the 2 halves match exactly? And the answer is yes, they would. So that is a line of symmetry. So the diagonals in a square are also lines of symmetry. So a square indeed has 4 lines of symmetry. There's one there, and there the other one is through the other diagonal. Okay, and look at where these diagonals all meet. At this one point right in the middle of the square there. Okay. Now let's think about patterns with squares. Okay. We can make lots of kinds of patterns with squares. And I would encourage you to have a go at this. The thing about squares is they've got, of course, all the same sides and all the same angles. So it's dead easy to make a pattern out of squares. Now we can make a pattern of squares within a square by, for example, if I just simply drew in a line there and a line there. Oops, sorry, a bit clattery. We can see we get 4 squares there, although I didn't measure it, so it's not being exact. Okay, and within each of these squares, if I wanted to, we could split that into another 4 squares. And then within each of those squares, we could split that into 4 squares. And we could keep going with that as long as we can still fit the lines in the top right hand corner. So we can see here we're getting a little pattern built up. Okay, so we've got lots of different patterns that can be made with squares. We can join squares together to make patterns, or we can draw squares within squares. And of course, don't forget, I'm not doing this with a ruler, but we can also get these kinds of patterns if we draw squares within squares. And you can always colour those in or shade them, and you'll get some pretty good pictures. Okay, so that's just to give you an idea of some of the kinds of patterns that you can make with squares. Okay, so now we're going to look at rectangles. So we need to think about the sides of a rectangle. So let's just draw a rectangle here. I'm going to make this one 8 centimetres long, and it's going to be 3 centimetres that way. Alright, so here's a rectangle. Now, looking at the sides of a rectangle, we touched on this a little bit yesterday. If we've got a rectangle, then the opposite sides are equal in length. Okay? But also, this pair of opposite sides are equal in length, but they're not equal to those two. So it doesn't make sense to do that, because that says that all the sides are the same length, and they're clearly not, because it's not a square. So what we do is put an extra dash to show that the sides with the same number of dashes on are equal in length. Okay, let's have a think about the angles in our rectangle now. I think you can see quite quickly and quite clearly that these angles are all right angles again, just like they were for a square. So we mark each of the angles with the little square in the corner that shows that they're right angles. All right, now let's have a think about lines of symmetry. So think about a page in your jotter, okay? If you were to fold your page in half down the middle, let me just measure where the middle is. Right, so if we were going to fold this page in half, the two halves would match exactly, wouldn't they? And that's therefore a line of symmetry. Same across the way, like a square as well, that if we were to fold our page lengthwise, it would still match. Okay, so just think about taking a rectangle of a piece of paper. There's 2 ways that you can fold it, across the middle and down the middle, where the 2 halves match exactly. But now think about corner to corner, okay? So we're thinking about folding a rectangle corner to corner. Now let's just have a little look so far. Like I was just saying, we've got a piece of paper, and I've folded it, so I'll just show you this. So there's my piece of paper to start with. Oops. Before I'd folded it at all. Then I folded it, you can see now, I folded it in half that way, and then opened it out again, and you can see that the two halves matched exactly, didn't they? Okay, then I folded it the other way that we were talking about, across the way. So we've got this fold next, so folding it in half lengthways, and when we open that out, we can see that we've got that other fold there. So the two halves matched exactly, so that shows us that we've got our line of symmetry that goes across the way, as well as our line of symmetry that goes down the way. Now, the next thing I want us to think about is a diagonal fold. So if we fold the rectangle there, in this diagonal, are the two halves of the rectangle going to match exactly, or are they not? Well, I can answer that for you. The answer is not. Okay, so for either of the diagonals, the two halves do not match exactly, so they are not lines of symmetry. So whereas a square has lines of symmetry that go corner to corner, a rectangle doesn't. Okay, so that's what I wanted to talk about with lines of symmetry. Then again, we can make lots of patterns with rectangles. So we can draw rectangles within rectangles, and what you will find as well, oh dear, not drawing with the wrong thing, sorry. What you will find, that's not a great colour either, is it? Hang on. When you draw a rectangle, every time you draw a line that makes right angles, you get another rectangle. Or you can make two rectangles. So for example, if I draw a line across there, then I've split my rectangle into two. If I draw a line all the way down there, I've now got 1, 2, 3, 4 small rectangles, but I've also got that one, so that's 5, 6, and I've still got the big one. So you can split into lots of different rectangles, okay? And one of the questions on your practice today is a bit of a puzzle to see how many rectangles you can see in a picture, okay? And then the last thing that I want us to think about is, first, well, these two things kind of go together. So patterns, you can put rectangles that are the same size and shape beside each other. You can do the same with squares as well. And they will what's called tessellate. They would just make a pattern that goes on forever with no gaps, okay, and no overlaps. So where are they? Well, that is tied in with the patterns, because like I said earlier, when I'm looking around, or I said it in one of the other lessons, I'm in my kitchen at the moment, and when I look around, I've got tiles on the floor. They're square tiles, okay? So they all fit together with no gaps and no overlaps, right? On the wall, I've also got tiles for some of the kitchen, and they're rectangular tiles, so they fit together perfectly. All the cupboard doors are rectangles. I don't have any squares, I don't think. And so a cupboard door will open and close without the door being on a tilt if it's a rectangle, okay? So there is a huge discussion that we could have about why doors are rectangular, and maybe we'll do that sometime when we're back at school, okay? But I want you to have a look around you just now and think, how many rectangles can you see? And are they beside other rectangles in a pattern, or are they on their own? Okay, I'm looking at my back door here. I've got, there's a panel on my back door that's got 6 little windows in it, and they're rectangles all put together. Okay, so the more you look, the more you'll see. So I want you to have a good old think about that And if you have a look at the practice questions as well, I will see you tomorrow. Well done.